This is Spike, and welcome back to the Chore of Duty. In this episode, we're going to be looking at the Uniparty and the McGOP. And let me define a few things. I'm recording this on January 9th, 2023. This past week, the House saw a pretty raucous beginning because before they could even start any business or even be sworn in, they actually had to elect a speaker to swear them in. And that's where all the drama came from. If you've been watching the Who, What, Where account over on Twitter, or you've been looking at the speaker vote hashtag, you've seen me trying to sound off in real time. I thought I'd start with one of the votes just to see how things are going, give my 2 bits. I didn't know it would go 15 rounds. I don't think anybody expected it to go 15 rounds, but it did. But that's all right, because ultimately, in the grand scheme of things, it worked out. But you've also seen a lot of exposure of a lot of people. I'm going to get into that a little bit here, and we're going to take just a few minutes to discuss what happened and what happens next. So, who am I talking about when it comes to the Uniparty and the McGOP? Let's start with the McGOP. Okay, right now there are 3 main leaders in the Republican Party. You have Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, who's a Republican from Kentucky. You have Ronna McDaniel, who is the lady now in charge of the Republican National Committee. She's one basically in charge of Republican efforts to get elected. And eventually we got Kevin McCarthy, a Republican from California, who became Speaker of the House after 15 votes. What happened was 20 conservatives, at one point 21, but it went back down to 20. Basically, a core group of 20 conservatives decided that they were not going to play ball anymore with the McGOP, which is McConnell and McCarthy and McDaniels. Those 3 have been trying to force the GOP into a particular mold, basically going in lockstep just as the Democrats have been doing for some time. We'll get into the Democrats when I discuss the Uniparty. What the 20 conservatives did was basically hold McCarthy's feet to the fire and say, no, you are going to talk to us. You're not just going to order us around. You're not just going to boss us. We are going to do what we need to have our concerns addressed. And this is the only time where we can actually force concessions from you. So needless to say, McCarthy and his buddies didn't get into that, didn't like that very much. You saw Popeye Dan Crenshaw and his buddy Mike Rogers of Alabama. They got all hot and bothered, and where Rogers actually allegedly tried to take a swing at Matt Gaetz, who was one of the leaders of the Republicans who were holding out. But what actually happened at the end of the day, McCarthy caved on everything. The conservatives knew he would, and they got pretty much everything they wanted. Now, before I get into the concessions they got, let's go back to the Uniparty. All the while these 15 votes were taking place for the speakership, and it was largely controlled by the Republicans, because Republicans have a very slim majority in Congress, in the House of Representatives. They are the minority in the Senate, of course. What you saw was all of the Democrat Party members, all 212 of them, I believe, voted lockstep 15 times in a row for Hakeem Jeffries. Now, again, if you've been looking at my Twitter feed over at the Who, What, Where hashtag, what you found is you saw me referring to somebody I called Cali Clan, and that's Hakeem Jeffries. I'm not going to go too deep into the history of Hakeem Jeffries. Let's just say that if you start looking into him, I would strongly advise you to start your browser in incognito mode before you go looking for him, because you're going to find some ugly, nasty things you really don't want your IP address being associated with. The point being, the Uniparty are the people basically in charge of the Democrats and the Republicans. They have been butt buddies not for years, not for decades, but for centuries. From the very beginning, it's always been this way. These self-professed, self-chosen elites have decided they know better than everybody else, and by golly, they're going to lord it over everybody in the process. Anybody who steps out of line is punished. They have a plan. Both the Democrats and Republicans, they have a plan. They're going to do it their way. Sometimes the Democrats will have their name on the mantle. Sometimes the Republicans will have their name on the mantle. It doesn't matter because they're all the same people and they pursue the same things. It's just Republicans drag their feet a little more than the Democrats do. While the Democrats will do wind sprints towards socialism, the Republicans will kind of like shuffle their feet along, but they're still going towards socialism. That's what the GOP does. McConnell, McCarthy, McDaniels, they're all essentially socialists to one degree or another. They all think that their government ideas are the best plans, but it doesn't matter if it's Democrats saying government's the solution or Republicans saying government's the solution. They're all saying government is the solution. It's just their own particular spins on it. Okay, so that's what I mean by the Uniparty. It's the Democrats and the Republicans taking turns with each other, giving the illusion of a choice when it comes to political parties, when it comes to candidates, when it comes to policy. It's all fake, it's all phony, always has been. What we saw last week in the speaker election were these 20 conservatives, and I won't get into the names right now. Just remember, Matt Gaetz was the one basically in charge of them. He was the one who was rallying everybody together, and he was the one extracting the most concessions. This is why Alabama's Representative Mike Rogers stood up, took a swing at him, because he considered Gaetz to be essentially a traitor to the Republican Party, him and his 19 cohorts. What Gaetz was actually doing, he was trying to get McCarthy. He and the 19 others knew they had a unique opportunity. McCarthy was weak because of Ronna McDaniel's incompetence in the 2022 campaign. And let's face it, it was incompetence. She was more focused on shutting down Donald Trump than she was on shutting down Democrats. That was the problem in the 2022 election. The Republican rank and file know this, especially the Trump-supporting populists, and they have been infuriated with her ever since, but there's nothing they can do. McConnell did the exact same thing. He is a senator, and yet he has outsized control over the support the Republican National Committee will have on people at the state and local levels. If McConnell or McDaniel decides they don't want some particular Trump supporter in office, then they'll withdraw the money and, in essence, collapse their campaign and force them to run broke against whoever the Democrat is, basically endorsing the Democrat for office. What happened last week are these concessions. Now, let me run over these concessions real quick because a lot of them sound commonsensical, and you may even think some are already in place, but they're not. Remember, our national debt is now $31 trillion. Our great-great-grandchildren are on the hook for this. Okay, we have already effectively bankrupted the next 3 generations, including our own. So let's go over what they actually got out of it. Now, the first thing has to do with budget. A lot of these have to do with budget, but the first one here requires the budget be broken down from one consolidated omnibus. An omnibus is where everything gets piled on all at once, so it's one vote, yes, straight up or down. What the 20 conservatives demanded was that these be split up into 12 different appropriation bills that runs from agriculture to defense to transportation. So each one covers a different area, a major area of the budget. So the budget itself is split to 12 separate votes. So now all the little sneaking and hiding and earmarking and stash-aways that are in the bill will now be more likely to be exposed because they're now in smaller bills, not in the large 4,000-page omnibus budget. Okay. McCarthy also agreed to cap discretionary spending at the levels they were at the beginning of the Biden administration, which was insane to begin with because Trump didn't show much physical restraint either when it came to the federal budget. But at least it's a starting point. It helps staunch the bleeding a little bit. Of course, there are a few Republicans who are criticizing that because that means that, oh dear, national defense spending could be reduced by $75 billion, which is probably roughly what's spent on interior decorating at the Pentagon along with all the woke programs. So I'm not overly concerned about that one. Let's move on. McCarthy agreed to create a subcommittee on, quote, the weaponization of the federal government. This is one that I was interested in seeing happen. Basically, this will be a House committee that will investigate the federal government's information collecting on private individuals, such as me and Chris, among other people, including potentially the Department of Justice's probe into classified documents at Trump's home at Mar-a-Lago. McCarthy also agreed to reintroduce the Holman Rule, which allows Congress to reduce federal salaries, should they so desire. He also agreed to reduce what's known as the motion to vacate. This basically is a no confidence vote in the Speakerdom. It used to be 5. That was where he had drawn the line, that it would take 5 House members voting on this in order for it to advance to the floor for a vote. And he agreed to reduce it to 1. Now, in exchange for that, of course, that means that the Republicans would have to agree not to do anything about it. But that doesn't mean the Democrats aren't going to try to pull something like that. But honestly, what they're doing there is setting up any future Democrat groups, because the Democrats are not going to be able to resist the urge to shoot themselves in the foot. They are going to weaponize this one vote rule, okay, and they are going to make McCarthy's life an unending cesspool of no confidence votes. These, however, would be simple majorities. It won't require 50% plus 1 as the confirmation hearings did, which is why it dragged out so long. This would be simple majority, which if the Republicans are smart, they'll rally around them and shoot it down. Now, the next one is also budget related. McCarthy's agreed to give House members 72 hours to review a bill before it comes to the floor. So there'll be no more, you have to sign it in order to find out what's in it, that Nancy Pelosi liked to do. Now, this is a good first step, another good first step. 72 hours, let's be honest, most of the members of the House are not going to read any of these bills where they have 7 hours or 72 hours or 72 weeks. They don't care. They're just going to be told by their boss, McCarthy, which way to vote. Or Jeffries. Jeffries is now the minority leader in the House. They'll be told which way to vote, and they'll dutifully vote, except for, of course, the 20 conservatives. But what it also does, it gives the press a chance to look into this, and it gives them 72 hours to start communicating to their readers and their listeners exactly what's going on in these bills. So now if there's a bill being pushed through and somebody notices, you know what, there's a big stinker right in the middle of it, this gives the public a chance to find out about it and start screaming at their House members to not vote for it. Now, in addition to the 72 hours, it also requires a vote to raise the federal debt limit, which I'm good with, and to hold votes on congressional term limits and a border security plan. We'll see what happens there. The biggest one, by far and away though, the biggest concession that McCarthy had to make, and this has to infuriate McConnell and especially McDaniel, because this binds both of their hands. McCarthy agreed to keep the Congressional Leadership Fund, which is a McCarthy-affiliated super political action committee, out of open House primary seats for seats considered safe, and to appoint House Freedom Caucus members, the Republican 20, to seats on the House Rules Committee. Basically, he's rewarded the 20 for standing up to it. The most important part of this is that he's keeping the Congressional Leadership Fund out of the primary elections. If basically what McCarthy has agreed to do is that everybody, all Republicans start off with in the primaries with their own campaigns raising their own funds. The Congressional Leadership Fund, if they consider a certain primary Republican to be unsuitable for their office, will start throwing money at them in the primary to defeat them and get their own Republican installed in the primaries. Basically, McCarthy has agreed to pull his chips off the field. The Congressional Leadership Fund will stay out of open primary seats in the House. Now, this doesn't guarantee that McConnell's going to do the same thing with the Senate. McConnell also has quite a bit of stroke with the RNC and Ronna McDaniel and her spending on Senate seats and state seats across the nation. But by McCarthy making a concession and proving that this is something that is actually happening to the world plus their dogs, now all of a sudden this nasty little stick that they've been threatening their members with is now public knowledge, and they're going to be far less effective in using it. So I think this is, by and large, a very good thing. Now, I do want to say one last thing before I wrap here. There has been a lot of talk that this past week has been an embarrassment to the GOP, especially to the House GOP. I beg to differ. I know I gave McCarthy and McConnell and McDaniel a lot of hassle this past week because, quite frankly, they deserved it. It was McDaniel and McConnell, and to a certain extent McCarthy, because he was expecting to just be coronated Speaker of the House. Those three sat there and just screwed the pooch on a daily basis in the 2022 campaign, didn't take it seriously, preferred Uniparty candidates over MAGA candidates and independent candidates and conservative candidates. They were willing to actually throw their own constituencies under a bus just so the Uniparty could stay in control and so they could wait for their turn. That is the reason McCarthy, and that wound up biting McCarthy on the butt. That's the reason why McCarthy had to go through all of this. If the GOP, we'll say, had actually run a more effective campaign strategy in the House for the 2022 election, it wouldn't have been close enough that these 20 would have been able to extract all of these concessions out of McCarthy. Basically, the GOP guaranteed their own humiliation again, which is what the GOP does. They guaranteed their own humiliation all over again by refusing to back their candidates. And withdrawing funding, which was what McConnell did to a lot of people, and McDaniel, withdrawing their funding support crippled a lot of these campaigns to the point that they just couldn't recover. So, Mitch McConnell, you little turtle, you deserve every drop of derision that lands on your head. Ronna McDaniel is most likely not going to survive this. She's the one who's going to take it hardest in the shorts. Now, understand, McCarthy was the one who was publicly embarrassed. Ronna McDaniel, is going to be the one who will be privately humiliated, and most likely her career ended over this. because the big money donors for the Uniparty on the Republican side are going to see this, and they are going to have a vote of no confidence that will end Ronna McDaniel's career. So, having said that, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this. It's been a long, hard slog for those of you who may not have heard. I was in the hospital over the holidays. I'm recovering quite nicely. Hopefully be back to work here shortly. We were not doing any other episodes on the Who, What, Where Network this week because of an illness in the family. Basically, Chris got sick. We're hoping we'll be back up and running again next week. So bear with us. We're getting there. So until next time, I'm Spike. Make sure you stay tuned to the Who, What, Where Network, wherever you find us on Anchor, Spotify, or over at YouTube, or on Facebook, or on Rumble. Wherever you find us, make sure you subscribe. Give us a like. Give us a recommendation. Give us some feedback and let us know how we're doing. We are not monetized on any platform. We don't make a dime off of this. I think we might have $5.80 waiting for us over on Spotify if we ever get around to splitting it. Of course, by the time we actually get around to withdrawing it, it'll probably be worth about 58 cents. But either way, we do this for you. We don't do this for the money. And because we aren't monetized, we can say a little more of what we actually intend to say and what we think. So we are grateful for every single one of you who listens. So keep getting the word out there. Let more people know about these podcasts and about these videos. And hopefully I'll get a functioning camera in here soon. But we're already on our, second, third, fourth, something like that. Either way. Until next time, everybody, I'm Spike, wishing you all the best of Happy New Year's. Goodbye, everybody.